So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to go over the classification of plants. So we know kingdom Plantae, they've got cell walls and chloroplasts and so on. We're going to get down into the next level of classification. So kingdom Plantae, phyla, and there's four main phyla that we're going to get to know. There's the Bryophytes, Phyllocynophyta, Coniferophyta, and Angiospermophyta. You're gonna want to make some flashcards, I think, at some point, because you're gonna have to be able to talk about the major features of all of them, or be able to distinguish which ones they would be based on the description of a plant. So the first one, Bryophytes, these guys originated quite a while back, and we mostly think about these as the mosses that we see, like moss growing on trees or on rocks. It's little short, carpety grass type, but it's not grass. It's definitely different than grass, but it's kind of carpety, and you see it on the sides of trees or on rocks or other things growing out, usually in pretty moist environments. So here is an up-close picture of moss, of Bryophytes. And Bryophytes are special in the fact that they don't have a true root system. They have these little things called rhizoids. They don't have any vascular tissue, so they don't have, all that xylem and phloem that the other plants have. They're restricted to pretty moist environments because of that, because the way they transfer water around is through osmosis. So they don't grow to be that big. And lastly, they have their embryos. When they make their embryos to go out to the world, those are spores rather than seeds, like we see in some of the larger plants like Angiospermophytes and Coniferophyta. Okay, so Bryophyta, moist environments, rhizoids, they have spores, no vascular tissue. They don't even have too much of a waxy cuticle on their leaves. The Phyllocynophyta, these are the ferns. So you can see a little picture down here of under where my head was of what a fern looks like. We see those quite often in the forest. And ferns have these really showy, fancy leaves that tend to kind of unfurl when we see them come out about this time of year in the spring. And so besides these pretty fancy, showy leaves, these guys do have true roots and do have a true vascular system. So they have xylem and phloem, and they can get pretty big. So they can transport water and sugars throughout the plant. So they'll do their photosynthesis in the leaves, and then they can send that down the phloem to other parts of the plant, and they can take water up and then send that all the way to the tips of the plant. They don't rely on osmosis. They rely on using their vascular system more than anything. And these guys also, similar though to the Bryophytes, is they have spores for the embryo rather than having seeds. Okay, so these have a true vascular system, true roots, but they do not have seeds. They have spores. Now we start to get to the Coniferophyta. So these guys have true vascular systems, true roots, but at this point they have seeds. These are the Coniferophytes. So these Coniferophyta, you'll recognize those more like the Christmas tree type things, spruce and fir and pine. And they tend to grow, pretty straight. And they will often have associations with fungi that help fix nutrients like nitrogen and other things. And they have cones, Coniferophyta, and they make seeds. Now their seeds are naked, so they don't have a seed coat around them, which we'll learn when we get to know plants pretty well later. We'll look at some seed coats in the Angiosperms. And also notice that their leaves have these, are in more needle-like fashion usually, and they tend to have kind of a, they do have a waxy cuticle, but theirs is definitely pretty thick. And these guys can keep their leaves generally all year round. Not all of them do, but many of them do. The Angiospermophyta makes up the vast majority of plants on the planet. This ranges from grasses, right? Just grass when you go outside and mow your lawn, to dandelions and little flowers, to some of the biggest trees like oak trees and palm trees and all the different types of trees. except for the conifer trees. So most of the plants that you see outside, you're hedging your bets if you say, oh, that's an Angiospermophyta. These guys are known as the flowering plants. You might not always recognize their flowers so easily, like in grass, but if you ever let your grass go too long, you'll see it starts to get these little kind of wheat, wispy things on it. Those are flowers. And so the angiosperms, they have true roots, they have a vascular system, they make seeds, but their seeds have a seed coat on it, like a little, covering that's kind of hard and protects them. And they make flowers. So they're the most common. And I put together a nice little table to kind of show you the major differences here. So the environments of the bryophytes, mostly moist, right? No vascular tissue. They have rhizoids and not real roots. Their leaves are tiny and arranged radially. They've got no waxy cuticle. They make spores and no fruit. The ferns, they can actually live more on land. They can live in moist environments too. All of them actually can, but they're not restricted to it. Vascular tissue, yes. Roots, yes. You can see that, from here on out, everybody's got vascular tissue. Everyone's got roots. These guys have those fancy leaves, right? And they do have the waxy cuticle. All the rest will have that waxy cuticle. It helps keep water in. But these guys have spores. So bryophytes and Phylloxenophyta both have spores. But again, no flowers, or no flowers, no fruit. The Coniferophyta, again, it's got vascular tissue. It has roots. It has a waxy cuticle. And it has seeds, but there's naked seeds and there's still no flowers. They make cones, and they can actually live in poor nutrient soils because they have this cool evolutionary relationship, mutualistic relationship with fungi and bacteria to help them get the nutrients they need. Angiospermophyta, the most common, again, they have vascular tissue, they have roots, they have waxy cuticle. Their leaves range tremendously, from species to species, from grass to, all the different types of flowers and maple trees and you name it. These guys do have seeds as well, but theirs have a seed coat, right? And now this is the big one, is they have flowers and fruit, okay? Unlike all the rest. Okay, that's plants. And on the next video, we're going to get into animals.